Yeah, in the meantime, I got bitten a couple of times by rattlesnakes, and I sort of left out that part of those are very negative things because anytime anyone's bitten by a venomous snake, it's his own stupidity and clumsiness. And you don't particularly want to admit to that. But it was quite an incredible experience. I was in the army for one of the bites. Yeah, I was in the army for one of the bites. A prairie rattlesnake bit me on my forefinger, and I was hospitalized for 15 days. Went through a whole rigmarole, and ended up losing the activity of my trigger finger. So I would be a lousy soldier in Vietnam anyway. So, but yeah. And then the second one was after I'd gotten out of the army, I went and I was collecting these little rattlesnakes in Arizona and got bitten by something called the green rock rattlesnake, which it was very interesting because I went through various phases. In the middle of the night, I went blind for a couple of hours, and I didn't go to hospital because it was such a small snake. I thought, I don't have to go. But then in the middle of all these things that were happening to my body, I realized, shit, man, I should have probably gone to hospital. But yeah, came through that okay. While I was working at the Miami Serpentarium, I met several people who were snake hunters there. And although I continue to say and realize that my guru was Bill Haast, and I learned all my technical stuff from him. What I learned about snakes and snake hunting, I learned from my pals who were out in the Everglades making their living. They were the tribals of Florida, basically, because they were making their living by catching snakes, the same way the Urlas, whom I would work with many years later, were making their living by catching snakes. And there's nothing can hone your skills better than to depend on finding wildlife to make a living. If you're just a dilettante snake hunter and you go out there because, wow, it's a lot of fun, you're never going to become the real snake hunter. The real snake hunters are the guys who are making their living. And at the same time, these guys were all hippies, almost invariably. They were dope-smoking hippies. And I fell into them very easily. And my then girlfriend turned me on to marijuana for the first time. And I was suspicious of it, like everyone should be. My God, and once you start smoking marijuana, the next thing is you're going to take heroin and you're going to die. And your brain is going to get scrambled and so on. Well, my brain did sort of get scrambled, as you can tell by the way I rant, but not in the same way that, it's fearfully presented to everybody. The interesting thing was it was a whole subculture which was just emerging in the early 60s, which reached its peak as the war in Vietnam reached its peak, because the protests that were coming out of the youth were actually created such a wave of anti-war sentiment that ultimately America did have to pull out. Well, of course, they got beat by the Viet Cong too, which helped a lot. But this was an incredible chapter in American history, and a lot of it was related to drugs. And I'm not talking about drugs in the bad sense. I'm talking about psychedelic drugs, from grass to LSD to mescaline and psilocybin. And these were things which we all considered acceptable. Things like heroin and morphine, these kind of things are real downers. These are the death drugs, and none of us would touch them. We were all sort of, saying getting high is quite okay. And it's a very creative thing. And in a way, if you look into it a little bit deeply, if you start reading Richard Alpert or Timothy Leary or stuff like people who actually were very seriously interested in drugs, Aldous Huxley, for example, people whom you can hold up as heroes, either as authors or heroes in the psychic sense. You have a totally different view of drugs And that's the way we were at that time. And there was some sort of funny little interludes as well. A friend of mine said, I'll tell you, if you want to catch skinks, which are really fast little lizards, here, take a speed pill, because what you got to do is speed up and grab them fast. And then another guy says, if you want to find rattlesnakes, they're almost invisible in the grass. They blend in so well, they're camouflaged so well. Here, take a little toke on this marijuana, and you'll concentrate and see these things. And in some ways, they were right. It really worked. or at least we made ourselves believe it really worked. I did some snake hunting out in Arizona, and I was in touch with a guy, Carl Caulfield, who was the head of the Staten Island Zoo. And he said he wanted particular rattlesnakes, and he'd pay me $50 for one Willard's rattlesnake, which is a rare mountain species, $20 each for green rock rattlers. And so I made about $500 or $600 in a very short time, enough to buy a ticket back to a ship ticket back to India.